Whoever did this is an absolute coward and is probably the most vilest of human beings. You kill a toddler.
9:15 p.m. A single mother is inside her home on a quiet street in Jackson, Mississippi. Her 2-year-old son is already asleep in his bed. Her sister is with her, the way she always is on nights like this. Then the gunfire starts. Within minutes, 3 people are dead. A mother, her sister, a toddler who never woke up. The car in the driveway is gone by morning. 2 men are pulled over on a Mississippi road not long after. For a moment, it looks like the case is closed. It isn't. 5 days later, the number of people charged with killing that mother, her sister, and her son doubles. This didn't happen in a bad part of town, on a street known for trouble. It happened on a block where neighbors know each other's cars, where porch lights stay on, where people assumed, the way most of us do, that nothing like this happens here. One neighbor said she thought the gunshots were fireworks. That's how unthinkable this was, even as it was happening. Police called it deliberate, calculated, and when Jackson's police chief stood in front of cameras days later, she used a word that almost never shows up in an official statement. She called the people responsible cowards. What she didn't say yet, because investigators didn't know it yet, was how far this case still had to go. 2 arrests were only the beginning. How do you walk into a home, kill 3 people including a sleeping child, and leave calm enough to drive away in someone else's car? And how does a case that starts with 2 suspects end with 4, in 2 different states, all facing the same charge? That's what this video walks through, from the first 911 call to the most recent arrest, using only what investigators and the court record have confirmed. If you want to follow cases like this one in real time, as they actually unfold, subscribe now. This one moves fast. To understand how 3 people ended up dead inside a home in under an hour, you have to go back to what that Saturday actually looked like before it happened, because nothing about it suggested what was coming. Queen Alexandria Lane sits in a residential pocket of Jackson, Mississippi, on the city's north side. It's not a street that shows up in crime reports often. Houses with yards, cars parked in driveways their owners recognize on sight. The kind of block where a shift in routine, a car idling too long, a person who doesn't belong, would normally get noticed. Inside the home on the 300 block, the evening had followed the shape most evenings did in a household built around a toddler. Kamari Given, 2 years old, had already been fed, bathed, and put down for the night. That routine would have belonged to his mother, Kiana Weathersby, 25, the way it did most nights. Her sister, Erica Weathersby, 30, was there too, not because anything unusual was happening, but because that's simply how the 2 of them lived. Erica showed up. She always had. By the time Kamari was asleep, he wasn't in a living room, wasn't near a window, wasn't in any position that suggests he was aware of anything happening around him. He was in his bed, the way a 2-year-old is supposed to be at that hour, with the quiet assumption every parent makes, that sleep in your own home is safe. Just after 9:15 p.m., that assumption broke. Multiple neighbors later told local reporters they heard what they initially believed were fireworks. It's worth sitting with that detail, because it says something about the street itself. Gunfire wasn't a sound people on that block expected to hear, so when they heard it, their minds reached for the most ordinary explanation available. Nobody called it in as shots right away. Nothing about the moment registered as an emergency, not immediately, not on that street. But inside the house, 3 people were being shot, according to police, multiple times each. Investigators would later confirm that Kamari was shot while he was still in his bed, not caught in a hallway, not near a doorway, asleep in the place his mother had put him to keep him safe. When Jackson Police Department officers arrived, responding to a call reporting an aggravated assault, they didn't find what a break-in usually leaves behind. No forced entry, no broken glass, no struggle that had spilled toward the street or the yard. What they found, once inside, was calm in the worst possible sense. 3 people, deceased, in a home that otherwise looked untouched. That detail would end up mattering more than almost anything else recovered at the scene. A home invasion gone wrong tends to look chaotic. This didn't. Someone had come in, done exactly what they intended to do, and left. And they hadn't left empty-handed. A red 2020 Mitsubishi Mirage, belonging to one of the victims, was missing from the driveway. Whoever walked out of that house that night didn't run on foot into the dark. They got behind the wheel of someone else's car and drove. That's not the behavior of someone who panicked. That's the behavior of someone thinking about their exit before they'd even made it out the door. Kiana Weathersby was 25 years old. She was raising a 2-year-old son in a city that rarely makes that easy. Jackson has spent years contending with a strained water system, a shrinking population, and a violent crime rate that regularly places it among the most dangerous cities in the country by national data. Raising a toddler in that environment, showing up for him every day, working, keeping a household running, isn't a small accomplishment. It's a daily one. People who knew Kiana describe her in straightforward terms. Her brother, DeMarco Bailey, put it plainly when a reporter asked what she was like, working and taking care of her son. Not out looking for trouble, just doing the work of being a mother. Kamari Given was that son, 2 years old. At that age, a child's world isn't large. It's built entirely around the people who show up for him consistently, the sound of a familiar voice, a bedtime routine, the sense that certain people mean safety. For Kamari, that meant his mother, and it meant his aunt. Erica Weathersby was 30, 5 years older than her sister, the kind of older sibling who had already navigated more, and who showed up when Kiana needed another set of hands, or simply because that's what sisters do. She was at the house that night for no more complicated reason than that. She was present, the way she always was. Together, the three of them made up a small, specific household on an ordinary Saturday night. A mother, her sister, a toddler already asleep, a television probably still on somewhere in the house. That detail matters for a reason beyond sentiment. Investigators stated early in the case that this did not appear to be a random act, an opportunistic break-in, or a case of someone in the wrong place. It had the markings, they said, of a targeted act, carried out by people who knew the address and likely knew who would be inside. Which leaves the question that would drive the entire investigation forward from that point on. If this wasn't random, who had a reason to walk through that specific door on that specific night? According to the Jackson Police Department, officers who responded to the 300 block of Queen Alexandria Lane on June 27 found all 3 victims deceased inside the home. From there, the investigation moved on 2 separate tracks at once, working the scene itself and working the vehicle that had vanished along with it. That vehicle, the red 2020 Mitsubishi Mirage, was recovered the following day, June 28th, abandoned at Manhattan Park in North Jackson. It was empty. No suspects were present, and no immediate arrest followed. But a car doesn't drive itself to a public park and sit there undriven. Someone made that choice, and vehicles tend to hold on to evidence in ways people don't always account for in the moment. Fingerprints on a steering wheel, DNA on a headrest, fibers, shoe prints on a floor mat. Investigators treated the Mirage as an extension of the crime scene itself, processing it with assistance from the FBI. Back at the house, the work was slower and more methodical. Shell casings, bullet trajectories, and biological evidence were collected and cataloged. According to police, the scene told a consistent story, one that ruled out the more common explanations early. This wasn't a robbery that escalated into violence. It wasn't a home invasion that spiraled out of control. Everything about it pointed toward intent. Behind the visible parts of the investigation, detectives were also working a quieter, more human channel. Tips from the public. Whatever else this crime was, it happened in a neighborhood full of people who knew Kiana, who knew Erica, who had likely seen Kamari at some point. That mattered. According to police, tips began coming in almost immediately. By June 29th, roughly 48 hours after the murders, those tips, combined with the forensic work moving in parallel, had converged enough to identify a specific vehicle investigators believed was connected to the case. What happened next moved fast enough to surprise even people close to the investigation. But before the arrests came, the city itself had already started to react. News like this doesn't stay contained to one street for long, and by the day after the murders, Queen Alexandria Lane looked different, even if there was no crime scene tape left visible by the time reporters arrived. Neighbors already knew. Word had moved faster than any official statement could. Candace Crump, a Jackson resident who didn't personally know the family, set up a memorial outside the home anyway, flowers and candles left on a lawn that, a day earlier, had looked like any other on the block. She told a local reporter it was the least she could do, that hearing 3 lives were lost at once, one of them a baby, was devastating in a way that was hard to put into words. That reaction extended beyond the neighborhood itself. Jackson Mayor John Horn addressed the city directly in the days that followed, describing what he called a troubling rise in gun-related violence and calling the deaths senseless. He urged residents to find another way to resolve conflict, framing the case not as an isolated tragedy, but as part of a pattern the city needed to confront directly. For DeMarco Bailey, the victim's brother living in Texas, the news arrived by phone call, the kind that reorders everything instantly. He was already raising 2 children alone, having lost his wife 2 years earlier. Now he was grieving 2 sisters and a nephew at once. His response, when a reporter asked what he needed, was simple and direct. Justice, not just for his sister, but for a nephew who was only 2.5 years old. There's a version of this story where a community stays quiet, where fear or distrust keeps people from coming forward. That's not what happened here. Tips increased. Neighbors who might otherwise have stayed silent spoke up. A GoFundMe was organized to help the family cover funeral costs. None of that undid what happened on Queen Alexandria Lane. But it meant the investigation wasn't running on forensic evidence alone. It was running on a community that had decided, without needing to be asked twice, that this crossed a line it wouldn't tolerate staying silent about. By June 29th, detectives had identified a vehicle they believed was tied to the homicide. In cases like this, that moment tends to go one of 2 ways. The trail goes cold, or it moves fast. This one moved fast. Officers attempted a traffic stop near 18th Street and Maddox Road in Jackson. The driver refused to stop. What followed was a pursuit, but a short one. According to police, officers were able to safely surround the vehicle and take 2 suspects into custody without further incident. Inside that vehicle, on the back seat, officers recovered 3 firearms, a 9mm pistol, an assault-style rifle, and a second handgun. Each would need to go through ballistics testing before investigators could formally connect them to the homicide, but their presence, found together with 2 men tied to a car stolen from the victim's home, carried weight on its own. The 2 men taken into custody were identified as Cornelius Carter, 28, and Jordan Carter, 28. Police confirmed the 2 share a last name but are not related. Cornelius Carter was charged with capital murder, along with a separate charge as a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. Jordan Carter was charged with capital murder as well. At their initial court appearance, a judge denied both men bond, citing their status as a known danger to the community, along with prior convictions that included aggravated assault, and in at least one case, aggravated assault against a police officer. For a moment, it looked like the case had reached its conclusion. Investigators had gone from a scene with almost nothing to 2 suspects in custody in under 48 hours, a pace that even seasoned detectives described as unusually fast. But police were careful, even at the press conference announcing the arrests, not to call the case closed. Detectives stated plainly that other persons of interest existed and that the investigation remained active. That caution turned out to be justified. The story wasn't finished. Roughly 5 days after Cornelius Carter and Jordan Carter were taken into custody, Jackson Police Department announced a 3rd arrest. Michaela Young, 25, was taken into custody and charged with capital murder. Young's alleged role in the case differed from the 2 men already charged. According to investigators, she was the one who drove Cornelius Carter and Jordan Carter to the home on Queen Alexandria Lane. Police say that after hearing gunfire from inside the house, she drove away, leaving the 2 men behind at the scene. Under Mississippi law, driving away rather than entering the home doesn't remove someone from legal responsibility for what happens inside it. Investigators said Young was charged under the legal principle that she participated in the commission of the crime itself, not as someone who happened to be nearby when it occurred. At her initial court appearance, a judge ordered her held without bond. For a case that already involved two capital murder charges, the addition of a third suspect reshaped the entire picture. This wasn't two men acting alone. According to police, it was a coordinated effort involving at least three distinct roles: two people allegedly inside the home and one allegedly waiting outside, ready to leave the moment things went wrong. Officials were careful again not to suggest the case was finished. They stated that additional arrests remained possible and that new leads were still being developed. If a getaway driver could be identified and charged 5 days after the initial arrests, it raises an uncomfortable question about how many other people may have known what was being planned before that Saturday night ever arrived. Behind every arrest in this case was a slower, less visible process: the actual work of turning a chaotic scene into a case that could support 4 capital murder charges within days. According to Jackson Police Department's lead detective, James Jackson, working alongside Captain Obie Wells Jr. and Deputy Chief Shrina Banks, the investigation advanced on 2 fronts simultaneously. Tips from the public made up one half of it. Investigators credited community cooperation directly with helping narrow down the vehicle connected to the crime, saying plainly that residents picking up the phone made a measurable difference in how quickly the case moved. The other half came through technology and federal partnerships. Detectives worked with a task force officer from the FBI's Violent Crime Task Force to trace the stolen vehicle and analyze digital evidence tied to it. Combined with the physical evidence collected at the scene itself, shell casings, trajectories, and biological material, investigators built probable cause fast enough to support capital murder charges against multiple suspects within a matter of days. Detectives were also direct about ruling out certain explanations publicly. Asked whether Kamari might have been caught in crossfire rather than deliberately targeted, investigators stated clearly that the evidence did not support a crossfire scenario. The attack, they said, was intentional, and Kamari was in his bed at the time he was shot. Not in a hallway, not near a doorway, not in any location suggesting an accidental exchange of gunfire. That distinction is central to why the capital murder charge applies the way it does in this case. It reflects an investigative conclusion that this was not chaos that spiraled out of control. It was, according to police, a targeted act carried out with clear intent. Investigators have declined to publicly speculate on a specific motive, citing the risk of compromising the case. But they have confirmed that the people charged were known to the victims in some capacity, even while withholding exactly how, in order to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Every person charged in this case is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. What's outlined here reflects statements made publicly by law enforcement, not a final legal determination. As of the most recent update from Jackson Police Department, 4 people face capital murder charges in connection with the deaths of Kiana Weathersby, Erica Weathersby, and Kamari Given, Cornelius Carter, Jordan Carter, and Michaela Young. Police have confirmed the investigation remains active and that additional arrests remain possible. All 3 victims are gone: a mother who built her days around her son, a sister who showed up simply because that's what she always did, and a 2-year-old boy whose entire understanding of safety was built around the 2 women who loved him. Jackson's police chief has said publicly that this case affected even experienced detectives in ways few cases do, describing officers who needed to work through their own emotions before they could continue the investigation. That's not typical language for an official update on a case still moving through the courts, but it reflects how deeply this one landed, inside the department and across the city. Jackson Police Department has been clear that this investigation is not finished. Detectives have stated that additional individuals connected to the case may still be identified, and that distance in time or geography does not change how the case will be pursued. To be clear, Cornelius Carter, Jordan Carter, and Michaela Young are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The details in this video reflect statements made publicly by law enforcement and remain subject to change as the case proceeds. If Jackson Police Department announces further arrests or new details emerge in court, that update comes here first. Subscribe if you want to be there when it does.